I think Islam hates us.
They have done nothing except wreak havoc and terror for our faith and our religion.
When we stand up to those who oppress our communities, that Allah accepts from us that as a form of jihad.
Foundations of society are fragile. We must be the shepherds of our own civilization.
If anyone answers either yes or no without making necessary distinctions, both are not telling the truth. They're lying.
Father, we pray that your word will become a hammer that breaks rocks into pieces. That you will raise up in this nation pulpits and prophets that will call the nation back to repentance.
Will you distance yourself from those who think differently, or will you join us at the table and talk about what is really important? This is the Al-Ma'idah Initiative, conversation without compromise.
You look perfect, man. You look great.
Okay, thank you. Let me just make sure I'm not covering the camera. Okay. So I'm an internal medicine and infectious diseases specialist. I work here in Toronto, Canada. I've been doing this for a little over 20 years. I've seen all kinds of epidemics in my career, but certainly have not really seen anything like COVID-19 before. It has definitely been a very challenging and extremely taxing journey for myself and most of my colleagues in the healthcare field. But it has also been a tremendous opportunity to take stock of what's important, put things in perspective, to ground ourselves, recognize where our priorities should be, where we need to invest our energies. And it has remarkably both complicated many things in the world, but has also simplified many things in our understanding. At least that's how I have been processing this, and it has helped me cope with the crisis as it has evolved. So thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here. Eric, what about you?
Yeah, I am an emergency room nurse at the University of Washington. I've been a nurse for about 13 years now, working on my doctorate right now in nurse practitioning, so focused in emergency medicine. This is, it's been an interesting last few months. I can remember starting out as a nurse and just hearing about SARS and all the other outbreaks around the world, but nothing that really affected us directly here in the United States. And now experiencing it, seeing how policies and procedures have changed almost on a day-to-day basis has really added to what already is a stressful job. And the anxieties that come with the changes, but then also the fears of possible infection and fears for family, fears for friends who are compromised, and learning to deal with those from different perspectives and a personal perspective of how do I rely on this as a Christian. So, but yeah, my background is 13 years of nursing as an emergency room nurse in ICU.
So let's dive a little deeper into the kind of day-to-day of this. So Abdu, how has this really shifted what your job looks like on a day-to-day basis?
Sorry, I'm just adjusting my camera for half a sec. There we go. I think what this has really changed for me is, normally when I come to work every day and I look after patients, I more feel fearful for them. I'm more concerned about their welfare than anything else, and that's paramount in my mind and in my heart as to try to safeguard them against any complications that can arise due to their illness and any other adverse health consequences relating to why they're in the hospital. I think what makes this pandemic so much more stressful is that I'm inheriting some of that fear myself. I'm inheriting some of that anxiety myself because this is an invisible enemy in some ways. We don't know where it's lurking. We recognize that it may be in our midst and that as healthcare professionals, we may be susceptible to the same thing, and we may become sick. And that's a unique experience. We don't have that same sense of, I don't want to say invincibility, but that same comfort and that same sense of confidence that we are more or less immune to the same thing our patients are going through. This has changed that for us. So as a healthcare worker, certainly there's that added sense of trepidation, that added sense of, fear, really, that something could happen to myself, that I could bring that back to my family. That's taken a lot of time, energy to cope with, and I've obviously drawn on my faith a lot to help give me a sense of hope, and to give me a sense of, I think, security, that hopefully I will stay out of harm's way. But it hasn't been easy.
What about you, Eric?
You repeat the question for me?
So how has COVID-19 changed your job on a sort of day-to-day basis?
Yeah. Day-to-day basis, I mean, it changes almost every day I come on the shift. But I think when I think about the things that I think about most as I'm going into the hospital, first, I have to center myself in knowing that I might see death today. Where I know that on a normal basis I might see death, but today, when I go into work, there's a higher chance I might see somebody coming into the emergency department who isn't going to make it out or even make it up to the floor. And a lot of times we stabilize them and we can get them to the ICU or somewhere else, and that's where they pass away. And so now what we're seeing is we get patients coming into the emergency department, and before we can even get them out, they're passing away. And so being in a mindset to know that that's a very real reality that I'm going to have to face today, and the emotional trials that come with that, and dealing with family who are calling and really having to give that to God and say, okay, God, help me love these individuals the best that I can. And I was just thinking about a case just a couple weeks ago where I had a patient come in respiratory distress with COVID-19 positive, and I barely had enough time to get some medications on board to give him some comfort, and he started trending down. So rather than leave the room and let him die alone, I just sat there with him for 5-10 minutes as he passed away, and just talked to him and encouraged him to saying, I'm here, I'm not going to leave you. I'm going to set aside a little bit of time just to kind of be the last person in this world that can encourage you and just show you some love. So I think that's one way it's changed. And also in the stress for coworkers. And I think across the board, techs, doctors, nurses, secretaries, administration, there's a lot of stress that is going through the units. And so learning to really talk through these issues with them of how do we interact when we are stressed, and the real possibility that we are at risk, but we still have to be providing high quality care, which means we still have to communicate. We still have to discuss things and not fly off the handle, which our fuses tend to be a little bit shorter when we're stressed. So I think those are just kind of the two. I mean, there's multiple, but at least two of the main things that I'm seeing.
Thanks. Abdu, you alluded to leaning on what you believe in this time. You want to go into a little more depth on what that looks like for you to lean on your beliefs in this time?
Yeah, I mean, as a Muslim, much of the adherence to my faith relies on the firm belief in that God is all-knowing, that God has a plan for everyone, and you don't question that plan, but instead you embrace whatever you have in front of you. And rather than focusing as much on fear of the unknown and fear of something potentially catastrophic being your destiny or that for your patients, I try and focus on whatever blessings I'm seeing in front of me, and that might be seeing expressions of kindness and generosity, and a nurturing ear or a nurturing voice that I'm seeing in the context of someone helping a patient or a family member, counting the blessings of my coworkers or even relative strangers who've displayed expressions of extreme kindness and generosity, that have been unsolicited in nature. When I see those examples in front of me, they help me reaffirm my faith. They help me reestablish that sense of trust that when I'm praying and I'm making supplication, it's going somewhere, it's spreading, that energy is being shared, through, the power of God, of Allah. And that gives me a great deal of comfort and strength to tackle each day and feel as though, I'm being carried with the strength of God and with everyone that He blesses by allowing to do good deeds and to share kindness with one another.
Eric, how as a Christian are you thinking through this?
Yeah, have been doing a lot of meditations on the Psalms and the Old Testament, and just how David and the psalmists continually cry out to hope in God when situations around me arise that are out of my control. When I'm tempted to despair, my hope is centered on my Savior and who is God. And so really centering my heart on that. And then from that comes my response to coworkers, to patients, to family members, that while that belief is shared by many, but not all are consider themselves Christians. And so how can my belief in God and my views of salvation through Christ alone affect others by how I treat them through this crisis? How can I emulate the love of Christ to others through my work or how I work with them? And how can I encourage others because I have hope in God? And trying to bring a hope to others who maybe don't have a hope or are searching for a hope.
Thanks. So right now we're in the middle of this, and I'm going to ask you guys a broad question of what you hope comes out of this in the world, and answer that however you want, whether it's religious, political. I want to give you free reign. Medically, I'm happy to give you free reign to say what you think. So we'll start with Abdu.
Wow. I mean, I think this is just such an unprecedented situation, and it's almost a defining moment in a generation for so many people, particularly young people. And there are so many aspects of our daily existence, our society, that have been touched by what's going on here, environmentally, in terms of the footprint that we place on the earth. The model of consumerism and indulgence that we, I think, are so used to following as a society in many parts of the world. Our, I think, lack of recognition of the scarcity of resources, the plight of impoverished people, homeless people, the lack of employment that so many people have habitually, perennially, perpetually, as opposed to people who have only been recently affected by this. The inequity of medical resources and the optimization of collaboration of medical technologies and research. I think every single one of these areas is a situation which can serve to be improved upon. And I think that the really great thing about this pandemic is it has really shocked many people into a sense of perspective. No better example than when you see pollution maps overlying China that look like nothing that people have seen in 30 or 40 years, or seeing water that has improved in terms of its quality, and seeing the renewal of, some species that look like they might have been extinct, a few months ago. I mean, these are extreme examples, but I think they have given us a glimpse of what our world can be like if we nurture it, if we respect it. And I hope that that same lesson applies to how we view one another. I think when this pandemic was first starting, one of the things that troubled me a great deal was this sense of individual instinct as being something that needed to be preserved at all costs. And I think that that unfortunately incited a lot of behaviors by people that were sometimes described as panic and fear, but in a sense were really exhibiting expressions of selfishness and, individual prioritization over others. And what I've seen evolve as people have learned to cope with this a little bit more is that that's changed. We've seen a shift towards selflessness and generosity, and a perspective towards others, recognizing that others are often much less fortunate than we are, recognizing just the staggering discrepancy in resources, things that we take for granted, and our plight being not being able, to function in a high level society compared to people who don't have a home on a good day and who don't have 3 square meals on a good day and don't have the luxury of a social environment because of the terrible situation they may be in. All of these perspectives, I think, are just very, very important. And if even a small fraction of our society recognizes what we have and what blessings we take for granted so often, if we can learn from that, recognize that this situation has humbled us to the point where we recognize what we can get by on and how little we actually need that's of value in our lives: family, faith, health, wealth by determination of, happiness and being content, as opposed to what's monetarily defining our wealth. I think those are just wonderful lessons to learn that hopefully will make our society a better one, that will make some of us better human beings and bring us closer to one another and hopefully closer to God as well. Sorry, that was a bit of a rambling answer, but there's just so much.
Perfect. I gave you a broad platform on purpose. So Eric, same question. Hopes for the world coming out of this, broad as you want.
Oh man, everyone sees Jesus. Well, I've been encouraged with some of the generosity that I've seen coming from corporations here locally in Seattle. I really hope that that continues on. Changing, their main focus of production of a certain product to mass producing other products that are helping those who right now currently are in need of hand hygiene products, mask products, just to name a couple. And so I hope that we see that continue on, where corporations who have previously been focused on the bottom dollar, they don't lose sight that while it's okay to be a capitalistic company and look for ways to make money, if your only focus is on how much I'm making on it and the $1 billion a year I get a net after this, but not how much am I giving back to society and to those who are actually in need currently, I think they're missing a lot. And there's a lot that can be gained in society when wealthy companies give back to it. So I hope that continues and actually broadens. I would love to see that broaden out of this. Also, I would really love to see our healthcare system change in how it functions and how it is regulated. I think one of the biggest issues is our lack of supplies medically that puts the healthcare workers, all of us, in a very compromising situation of when we come to work, do I have to reuse my mask? Do I need to bleach it? Do I have to bake it? What are my supplies for today? And unfortunately, it's been regulated. And those regulations, while they had good intentions at the beginning for it, it really puts us in a bad situation of being very unprepared for an outbreak or a mass situation where we have to utilize this stuff. And so I hope that it changes some way. I've had thoughts on how I would change it, but I don't know if they're perfect thoughts. I'm not going to share them, but at least moving forward, having that in our very recent memory that, hey, the way we did this, it didn't work out. And it put a lot of individuals who were there to help us in compromised places, and some of them got sick because of it. And so I hope the medical system changes, and I also hope that it changes for how we have access for those who don't have access currently for testing. And it's very broad for what I hope for it to change. I don't know if it'll all change or not, but I hope it changes a little bit. And I hope people see that they are frail. They are, we are not invincible. Even though we're young, the young ones still get sick. The young ones still are intubated and put in ICUs and put on ventilators. And so I hope that the realization that, we are fragile beings that are in need of help comes from this, of realization from that, but generally across the board. I think that opens up conversations about faith and religion and where our help comes from through the ability to see that. And I hope that it also sparks a consideration for others. I think that's one of the things that's been encouraging, but also frustrating for me. I've seen a lot of individuals step up and say, yeah, we need to be considerate of other people. But on the flip side of that coin, I also know a lot of people and have seen a lot of Facebook posts where people are just outright upset that their rights have been taken away from them. And while I can say, yeah, I agree, your rights maybe have been taken away from you for a time, but we need to be considerate of other people. And it's not bad to give up rights for a season for the sake of others, knowing that those rights will come back and praying that they do come back. So we need to keep others at the forefront of our thoughts and putting others before ourselves. I hope that continues to flourish and spreads.
Well, either way, this is going to have a huge impact on the world. I think what's unique about this in all of human history is I don't think everyone on the planet is going through this in more or less the same way. Whereas if you look, even say, Second World War, which is huge, somebody in New York City versus London, they're experiencing it in two completely different ways. Whereas this is almost a universal experience. Well, guys, you both have work to be doing, but thank you both for being here. I appreciate you taking the time to do this and have this conversation. Thank you guys for listening to the Almeida Initiative podcast. We will be back next week.